Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts. Use Spotify or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, or on Apple. Use Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel on Fluster today. Or on Android, use Spotify or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, use Off the Floor all the time. You wanted to be there today. People were adding me. I was at the Panther parade. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you soon enough, but we knew that this was going to happen while another team in town was having a parade. Off the Floor has 10 different channels, plus the stage shows. You can find it all there. The host updates, the draft channel. I guess we're going to get back to that. The transaction channel and more. Use the link in the description, $2.99 per month. Click on that. You can bypass the Apple upcharge. And again, you can cancel at any time. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down $5. Get 50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It is legal in the state of Florida. And after the NBA Finals are over, you can play MLB and more. And, of course, NFL season is coming up as well. So go to prizepicks.com. Use the code F-I-V-E. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Well, if you want something to happen in this town, plan a parade. Happens to somebody else. You know, I'm at the Panthers parade. We're trying to see it. Didn't rain this year, but it's funny because this is how good they've gotten. You know, my daughter and I, there was a circumstance where we couldn't really stay the whole time, even though we were close to the stage. So it took us about 3 hours to get back to an apartment in Fort Lauderdale, which is literally like 3 miles away. But she's like, well, we can always go next year. Because that's where they're at. That's where they're at. I mean, the conversations there were, well, they're going to end up retaining Marchant, Bennett, and Ekblad. That's where they're at. The Heat are in a different place right now. And so we're going to do a quick and dirty reaction pod. We would have done this 2 hours ago if Greg and I were both not. You're in Ohio. By the way, our floor plan, I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me, Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I was not ducking this today. People on Twitter, they do not realize, like, I have a life, like, outside of this. But whenever I actually try to execute things in that life, then something happens. Like when I'm with my daughter in Austin, Texas on a vacation, the only time the whole year, and that's when Jimmy Butler goes nutso, okay, and stands in the corner of a game and says he's lost his joy. Like, this happens all the time. So we knew this was going to happen today. Greg's in Ohio, and so we just trying to come together here for 15 minutes. So we're going to give you the news, react to it quickly, and then I'll have a longer podcast with Alex Eternal and others that's probably going to come up after this, where we'll sort of explore directions going forward, and then we'll pivot towards the draft on Wednesday, although I'm not exactly sure they're going to make their draft pick anyway, which we'll talk about as well. But let's get to the draft itself, okay? The draft itself, the trade itself here. Kevin Durant is not going to be a member of the Miami Heat, not next year, and probably not never. So let's just give that up. This has been a 9-year pursuit. I tried to bait Riley into saying it at the press conference that he would go after KD. I did my job. I did not fail you in that regard, okay? He said they were willing to manage an aging star as long as it's the right one. It was identified basically as Kevin Durant. They're not getting Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's going to be a Houston Rocket. I do want to say a couple things here also about the reporting of this. A lot of people have egg on their faces because they went too far out on this story. We always said that if Houston wanted to ante up more, they had a pretty good chance at getting him. They just didn't seem all that interested at the time. And it's funny to me that the Jimmy Butler trade actually sort of led to Kevin Durant not being a member of the Miami Heat. And Greg, this is how. It's not just that the Heat offered Jimmy at the deadline and Phoenix decided not to take him, but also that Jimmy helped eliminate Houston in the first round, which we talked about at the time and said Houston might be more inclined now to try to cash in a couple of pieces for a star as a result of that. So Jimmy actually contributed to the Heat not getting KD again. But Greg, your immediate reaction to a trade, why don't you read it out and we'll go through it, because I think Houston made out. I think it's a great trade for the Rockets. I don't know about Phoenix, and then we'll get to the Miami part.
So yes, the Phoenix Suns acquired Kevin Durant today. And to your point, we were all scattered as a network. Kevin Durant's heading to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 pick in the 2025 draft. So that's this week, 10 spots ahead of where Miami's picking. And then 5 second-round picks, which there's been a contingent of Heat fans that have talked a lot about how the lower level assets and stockpiling those could be valuable to the Heat. I've always kind of turned my nose up at that notion, but today when you see 5 seconds included in this deal as kind of the sweetener, I think that that's probably close to what got it over the finish line for Houston. Miami's potential deal, which we'll talk about here in a minute, included a lot of young players. And I think that in exchange for not having all those second round picks, Houston probably asked for some of Miami's future first round picks. And that was probably the sticking point. But you know what? As I kind of recite the deal and just my initial reaction, fans don't really want to hear that shit today. They don't want to hear why it didn't happen. And truthfully, for me, the Kevin Durant pursuit and him not arriving in Miami is not really that big of a deal. Because frankly, I didn't think emptying the clip for this 37-year-old KD was really prudent, right? But it's more of just in the aggregate, offseason after offseason, having lots of guys signal Miami. This is another player that wanted to be in Miami, and there's guys on the Heat's roster as well as on the coaching staff that would have loved to have Durant. Same happened with Dame Lillard. There's been other players as well. I just think today Heat fans feel like they missed out on another one. And it's crazy because like we've gone from a place where we used to say Riley got them all discounted. Now the running joke being, can he get any of these players? And is he willing to ante up for these players and not necessarily get them discounted?
Well, that's the whole thing, and that's the context, right, we need to put this into, because if it was just about this one situation, then I think we would evaluate it, and we might in further podcasts, and look at what exactly was offered and whether or not they made the right call not to offer all of it, because according to Shams, there were 2 teams in this at the very end, and it wasn't San Antonio, and it wasn't Minnesota, it was Houston and Miami, and I believe Shams is reporting on that. With that said, Shams is unclear in his reporting, and I just haven't had the time to investigate it yet because, again, I was 2.5 hours waiting for an Uber to get back from a Panthers parade, that I don't know if the Heat refused to offer all of the young pieces, which is what the Suns asked for at the deadline. Did they ask for that again and the Heat wouldn't do that? Or was it they wouldn't refuse to offer some of the young pieces? Because it comes in there, the reporting is like, well, they wouldn't offer the 20 Highsmith, Jaquez, Jovic. Ware's not even mentioned. That they weren't willing to give up, but they weren't willing to give up all of it. They weren't willing to give up some of it. I know people are coming to this podcast for answers. I don't have the answer on that yet, and that changes the equation a lot. And as Nekias Duncan, somebody we all respect, said, it's a different story if it's one or the other. If it's Phoenix was asking for everything and Miami wasn't willing to give up everything, okay, then I get that. There's another conversation to be had about, okay, well, then how are you going to actually maximize these guys that you have, right? Because I like Niko Jovic. I've made it clear, and I said on the last podcast, I think Niko Jovic has a chance to be a really good player. I'm just not sure it's in Miami because they don't know how to use him. So are you giving him an extension? Or are you going to find a way to use him properly, put him in a role and keep him in a role that brings out his talents? Or are we going to go through another year and say, well, Nico's got potential? Because if that's the case, then what are we doing here? Like that, and I'm sorry, but Jaquez, I don't have a lot of confidence after what I saw last year that he's going to get back to the player he was as a rookie, because I don't know what the second act is with him. I might be wrong. Players get better, and he obviously is somebody who wants to get better. He's said the right things. From what I've heard behind the scenes, he's done the right things. I just don't know if he has the ability to do what needs to be done to counter some of the counters that have come at him. So that's kind of what, and maybe they didn't, maybe they really like somebody that they're going to get at 20, but then there's also the possibility, and Barry threw this out there, they could trade 20 for a future pick to get their pick situation back in order. And Greg, that does get back to a conversation again, which we'll have on another podcast in more depth of, if Heat fans want them to stockpile assets and that's what they're doing, it's going to be painful in the process. But then you got to let the process play out. But then what is the process leading to? Is it just leading to we're going to have some cap space and some additional draft picks in 26 and then nobody's really going to be available in 26? I don't know. And so it's hard for me. And that's why I said this. I wanted this to be a shorter pod, and I was just kind of touch on it because I don't have the details yet of what Phoenix actually asked for that Miami refused to give. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. And for me, there's a couple things there, and we do have more investigating to do to kind of really figure out exactly what the max offer was and what made Miami blink. I don't think Kel'el Ware was in the deal, frankly. I think that this was a situation where in order for Miami to, if you're thinking about the players that were involved, if we're just doing salary matching, it was probably something like Andrew Wiggins and Kyle Anderson. That's just matching salaries. So you're looking at that versus Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks. That's kind of like whatever, right? So then what did the Heat have to do here? The Heat had the 20th pick in the draft. Houston had the 10th pick in the draft. So they had to close the gap between 10 picks in the draft and also make up for 5 second-round picks that were thrown in as sweetener. And to me, I think that they probably said you can take Jaquez, Jovic. Those should be considered somewhere in the neighborhood of first-round value players. Haywood Highsmith got thrown into the deal probably to make salaries work or because Phoenix is trying to be competitive. And where I think the sticking point was, and I think we'll get clarity on this in the future, is that they wanted future draft capital. And I think that that's where Miami probably drew the line in the sand. I don't think that it involved Kel'el Ware. I don't think he was part of the discussions. I think it had a lot more to do with that. If Miami wasn't going to have 5 seconds to throw in this draft, to throw in the trade, or they weren't going to have the 10th pick in the draft, they were going to have the 20th pick in the draft. They had to make that up somewhere, and that probably was going to be in the form of a future first round draft pick. And I think, to your point, Miami's probably not feeling like they're in the business of giving up first round picks unless it is a home run, not a Terry Rozier, not a 37-year-old Kevin Durant, a home run. So I just don't know that home run's going to present itself, and that's where Heat fans get frustrated. But to me, that's probably where I think the sticking point lies, but we'll find out more, obviously, as we deep dive.
I want to be clear on one thing because I don't want anybody to misunderstand on this, okay? Once I find out what they could have given and whether Phoenix would have taken it, then my view on this may change. But I went into this saying they need to get KD. So as we're on this podcast, I am just not optimistic that the guy is going to be there in the next 12 months.
Agreed.
So, right. So if that's the case, I was okay with a 37-year-old KD who averaged 26 points last year on maximum efficiency. And having him with Spoelstra leading in the way he does. I know it's not the same as other guys, but just by example, and in terms of the way he prepares and all of those kind of things, I think it would have been a jolt in the Eastern Conference. Now, if it turns out again that it was everything, then my view on that might change. But I don't want to be disingenuous of fans and say, well, they didn't get him and now I didn't want him. No, I wanted them to get him. Okay. I wanted them to get him for a whole bunch of different reasons. Yes, some of them are selfish and downloads and all the rest of that stuff. And it being enjoyable to go to 41 home games. Okay. Part of it is that. Okay. And we appreciate the chance to do that, but I want to be clear to people. They don't tell me what to say. And my credential is not on the line based on what I say. Okay. I would prefer they have a team that is watchable. I don't think that team last year was watchable. All right. Kevin Durant, while healthy, would have made them watchable. So I am disappointed they didn't get him, but I'm also waiting to see what it was that was out there because I don't think that the Houston deal is very good. I know you get the number 10 pick and it was higher than Miami's pick, which was 20. Jalen Green's contract does not do anything for me. We had heard they weren't really interested in that. Dylan Brooks, okay. I mean, I get it. It's salary filler that may have been more useful to them than, say, clearing out Duncan's money. The 5 second-round picks. Second-round picks. I mean, Miami will find better players undrafted than teams find in the second round. There are usually 5 players that come out of the second round every year. Don't give me Jokic as a once-in-a-generation player, okay? Like, the majority of second-round picks don't pan out. So, yes, Miami didn't have those second-round picks to give, but I don't think by any means this was a great package that Phoenix got. And I actually think for their purposes, Jimmy Butler, a first and a young player from the Heat, might have been a better package that they got at the deadline. They wouldn't, and they could have if they want to stay competitive. So
they've got like 9 shooting guards, Ethan. They've got Jalen Green, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal.
Yeah, do you really think they wanted to take Jalen Green? And that's what makes me think like maybe the Heat did pull back on something they shouldn't have pulled back on. And I'm curious to find out ultimately what it is. But I'm waiting it out to see until I know. I just think that's the responsible thing to do. But what I want to see Kevin Durant in a Heat uniform finally. Absolutely. I don't know that the Heat are ever going to be able to, if the Heat are unwilling to tank, okay, which they are, and they're not going to go through a painful 4 or 5 year process of accumulating picks. I don't know how they ever get to the position that say an OKC is or some of these other teams are. I know OKC is not as attractive a destination, or nor is Utah, nor some of the other teams that are stockpiling picks. But I don't know how they ever get to that position, okay, to be able to compete for players with trades anyway. And that's why I kind of have agreed with the Heat philosophy of, okay, try to compete, because they're not willing to, nor good at, nor will the fans be patient enough in this market, okay, for them to tear it down to the studs, okay, and okay, this is a draft pick here. They're not. So if that's the case, then I'm fine with the idea of staying, being irrational to the degree of trying to compete. So here's an opportunity to compete. We have a weakened East. We got a player in KD who has interest in going to you, even if maybe you prefer to be in Texas, still has a lot left in the tank. And that's why I was like, if it doesn't cost you too much, if it doesn't cost you everything, the ability to make other moves, ultimately to supplement the roster, then do it. I will get to the bottom of whether or not what Phoenix was asking for would have prevented them from doing all that. But until I find out that, yes, I'm disappointed. All right, on the other side, we'll have our final thoughts on this, and we got more podcasts to go. Before we do, don't be disappointed when you send money. You want to make sure that the person you send it to actually gets it. Making money moves should be easy, and that's why there's Cash App. It's fast, safe, and honestly just way more personalized than the other apps out there. No extra hoops to jump through, no extra stress. All the tools are right there to help you cash in. Plus, sending money with Cash App actually feels safe. They look out for you. If something seems sketchy, they see you might be sending money to a potential scammer. They'll warn you and make you think twice before you hit send. It's like having a personal bodyguard for your cash. If for whatever reason you don't already have Cash App, the entire crew of 5 on the Floor does, just download it for your phone's app store, sign up, enter our code on the floor in your profile, send $5 to a friend. You get $10 just for getting started. For limited time only, new Cash App users can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real, no catch. Just download Cash App and sign up. Use our exclusive referral code on the floor in your profile. Send $5 to a friend within 14 days and get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. Okay, now that he's gone off the market, I don't want to do a deep dive on DeMar DeRozan right now, although there are trades out there that could make the team better, like Rozier in a first. To get off of Rozier, bring in DeRozan. I don't know. We'll do more on that. I want to ask you a general question, and then we can close this one. Okay. If all they're going to do now is get under the tax, so they're not in a repeater situation, which has some benefits, they maybe even trade the 20th pick for a future pick to stockpile assets. The team that they run out there looks very much like the team that they ran 92 points behind Cleveland in the last 2 games. I mean, can we sell hope that they're trying to do things the right way? Is there anything that would make you feel more optimistic, or does? And I'll throw this in at the last piece, and this is the bomb I'm tossing into this. I don't think this is going to happen, by the way, in the next couple months. I think this is a next year decision. Okay, but if all they do is extend Tyler Hero, what are you thinking?
I mean, I tweeted that they should not extend Tyler right now, because I think that if you're not going to go all in, then you owe it to yourself to be extra careful with the way that you're going to manage all of this. And I think that includes how you allocate the percent of the salary cap that would require re-upping Tyler at a high number. Listen, like you mentioned it, like about not wanting to sugarcoat today. Today's a disappointing day for Heat fans. They wanted a shot in the arm like Kevin Durant. And I think that, like, ultimately more than anything, the rational Heat fan that exists out there, not the transaction crazy Heat fan out there, not the ones that want them to tank, the unrealistic bunch, but the rational Heat fan is trying to figure out what direction this is going. And I think that ultimately, and Barry Jackson alluded to this in one of his tweets today, that the Heat are almost up against their roster limit when you count how many guys they have on standard guaranteed contracts, or guys that they're looking to bring back in Davion Mitchell, etc. If they bring back basically the same team, Ethan, like, there is no selling hope in terms of that group being competitive or being like not the group we saw against Cleveland that had the worst deficit in a series in playoff history. Like, I don't think you can really look at the fans with a straight face and say that this team can come back and be competitive. So you're going to have to call it what it is. And to your point, I don't think fans have the patience for any of that. But even if it is long-term best for the Heat to start to stockpile assets and kind of approach this differently, it will beg the question of, are you going to use your expiring contracts to gain assets? Or are you going to just kind of half-ass through this and do nothing and bring back the same team? And that's where fans get really frustrated. So I just think that if there's some creativity that's shown throughout the offseason, if there's some forward-thinking moves where you see a move happen and you say to yourself, oh, that makes sense because this can happen in the future, I think fans would start to say, all right, I'm coming around to this. Like, I think Heat fans are actually, they're kind of yearning, for lack of a better term, Ethan, they're yearning to buy into something with this team. They want to sink their teeth into whether it be a contender or whatever the direction is. And right now it just feels like we're kind of stagnant, and that's what the fans are not going to tolerate. So even if it's just shuffling around the talent around Bam and Tyler, bringing back a different group and seeing if maybe it's more competitive or it fits better or your offense ticks a little better throughout the regular season, like, those are all things we can talk about. But I just think inaction and just basically bringing back the same group and then coming into training camp and spitting out the culturisms of, like, you know, being competitive and this group, you know, we enjoy going through this kind of stuff. Like, no one wants to trudge the road to happy destiny here. They either want to have a direction or they want to compete as a contender. And it has to be one of those two things. And I think the Heat need to go a long way this offseason in, pointing to some direction, one or the other.
I think all of that makes sense. And I think it's all stuff that we're going to explore. I'm not going to try to hide the disappointment, you know, in terms of another guy being out there, because this is not someone that, just like with Dame, this is not someone that we can say didn't have any interest in playing in Miami and the Heat didn't have any interest in. Now, they were not interested in going all in on the player, just as they weren't with Dame. And we made that clear. So we haven't sugarcoated that part of it from the beginning. We said they're not, for various reasons, contractually. But I do want to add this. They were willing to pay him. So for the whole thing about them being cheap about this, they were willing. I had heard all along they would extend him the 2 years for 120 or whatever it was, somewhere around that range, whatever it comes out to. So that was not the issue here. The issue is they believe in their assets, developing these assets and trying to gain more assets. And maybe it's for something else that they believe is going to be available. But right now, until they cash in on somebody that's available, and they haven't done it since 2019, Lowry, I guess, would be the other guy. But we know how that worked out. Okay, but I have to at least say they did get a premium free agent during that summer.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Right. But they believe in it. So I'm going to hold to this. Like, if you're keeping Nikola Jovic in particular and you're going to extend him, like, let's decide what he's going to be here, right? Okay, because I I'm not in and out of the lineup in 12 minutes and this and that, and then doesn't play. And then, but it's spot up shooter and all that kind of stuff. Like, we believe in our guys or not. Okay. That's what I'm curious to see. And where, for that matter, as well. Because that was a bit, we talked about that being a sticking point. It doesn't appear that it was at the end, but it was at some point. Anyway, thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. We're going to do more episodes. And again, sorry if it's a little frazzled today, but this is one of the things we weren't expecting to happen, but I absolutely knew what it would happen as soon as I left without a laptop and with not enough phone juice when I went to a parade. So we'll see if the Heat have a parade anytime soon. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.